blue collar and low income people living in the same developments. So it's a emission reduction program. It can be a clean energy program. It's a job program, obviously, as well as affordable housing. Healthcare. That would be Medicare for all. I want to go beyond that. Immediately go to national health insurance, which is what the Medicare for all program is now, but go beyond that to a national health service, like they have in the UK or Cuba or Costa Rica, where the hospitals and clinics are public, the health care providers are the public servants, and it's better for cost control, and we can also make it democratic and accountable. So every neighborhood has a clinic, not just those where the providers can make money. And we can talk more about that. Public education ought to be free from child care and pre-K right through post-secondary, technical, college, continuing adult education. And then secure retirement. The baby boomers' wages have been stagnant for the working class, and the housing and healthcare costs have gone up. People have raised their families, and now they are living in poverty on that Social Security check. So I'm calling for a doubling of Social Security. That's a proposal that's been around 10 years to develop, primarily by the name of Stephen Hill, who's in the Green South California. Written up in the Atlantic, and the Boston Review did a book on it. So we want to go with that program. So that's the Economic Bill of Rights. And then the third life and death issue is this new nuclear arms race. The treaties, we've abandoned 4 of the treaties. The New START treaty expires in February 1, I think, of the next administration. We're in a nuclear modernization program where the strategic nukes are 6 times faster than they were before, hypersonic, which means it's no longer you got 20 minutes to figure out if that's a false alarm. You need to launch when you think the other guy's going to launch, so you don't get wiped out in the first strike. And then they're expanding tactical nukes and conventional forces with doctrines that say we can use them in conventional warfare, which is a crackpot idea, that idea you can start lobbing these small nukes and it's not going to escalate into a strategic nuclear war that destroys us all. It's crazy. And we deployed a new tactical nuke in our warships off Iran in that recent crisis. You know, imagine if Trump had got grumpy one of those days. You know, that could have started World War III right there. So, meanwhile, the rest of the world is scared to death of what we're doing. And so 122 nations agreed to the text of a treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons in July 2017. And the International Campaign for the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons got the Nobel Peace Prize for that achievement. How many people knew that? Sure, it's peace action. That's about what I did. Okay. The American people don't even know that. The media doesn't talk about it. None of the major candidates have talked about it. So if the Greens can do nothing else, we should put nuclear disarmament initiatives into this debate. And what I'm calling for is a pledge of no first use. There's been some discussion of that. Unilateral disarmament to a minimum credible deterrent, and on the basis of tension-reducing initiatives, we go to the nuclear powers and the wannabe nuclear powers and say, okay, we need to negotiate complete nuclear disarmament. And so those are the life or death issues. And of course, the question I always get asked, and it's really started since Super Tuesday. I mean, you know, the Daily Beast, the Economist, RT. I've had a lot of a lot of people been contacting me since then because, you know, with Bernie out of the way they look at it, you know, am I going to spoil it for boy? Provide. And I say, no, the Democrats are spoiling the election. I got asked this today on RT. You know, what do you say to people that you know, you're spoiling the election? And I say, the Democrats are spoiling the election. We've given them a solution for 20 years. A ranked choice national popular vote instead of the electoral college. The Democrats have lost to the last 2 Republicans after winning the popular vote because of that damn electoral college. And in 2 decades, they have never made that an issue. They never made it a campaign. And they want to blame us. No, it's their fault. And the only way this will get raised is if we put it on the table. So these are reasons why the Greens have to run this race, because we need real solutions to these problems. And the Democrats and Republicans, they got no solutions. So that's sort of the policy platform. And I got a palm card, we're gonna pass it out now, with, you know, a whole lot of, because this is for the Greens, you know, they got their checklist, so you gotta touch all the bases. And even on that, it doesn't. There's so many issues. The other thing, and I'll wrap up with this, is, you know, what my campaign strategy is about. You know, I recently retired from the Teamsters. I had other plans, but a lot of Greens around the country. I was actually working at the post office because my pension was cut 20%. And this is a bipartisan decision. They changed the Employment Retirement Income Security Act of 1974 to allow multi-employer pension funds to cut our earned benefits. And ERISA supposedly protected us from that. And that was a voice vote at like 2 a.m. added to the omnibus spending bill at the end of 2014. And it was one of the founders of the Progressive Caucus that introduced it, George Miller, who represented Richmond and Concord, a liberal area of California. And, you know, the Republicans were for it too. So my pension got cut 20%. And I worked an extra year, or it would have been cut 30%. The existing retirees in the New York State Teamsters Fund were cut 30%. So I go to the post office. I'm working 12-hour shifts, getting a lot of overtime. Have 3 days off from, November 11th to January 7th. And it wasn't Christmas, Thanksgiving, or New Year's. Although on New Year's and Thanksgiving and Christmas, all we were really doing was washing machinery. There wasn't much to do. We were sweeping the floors, but getting paid. So I opened my email, and a whole lot of Greens have decided they want me to run. It took them a couple of months to persuade me, and then we did an exploratory committee, and there was support. But it was people. It was hard for me to say no. One was a good friend of mine who passed away last year, Bruce Dixon, who was an engineer of Black Senator. He's out in Atlanta. You go across the country to Mac Gonzalez out in San Francisco, almost mayor, Green mayor of San Francisco. So I couldn't dismiss that, and finally agreed to do it. So here I am. And what we agreed to in terms of our strategy was party building and putting these issues into the national agenda. We got to do the party building piece to get paid attention to. So what does it involve? We want to get on the ballots of all 50 states and DC. The best the Greens have done was last time, just time, 45 states with 3 states writing. We want to get primary action funds. And I'm the only candidate that is seriously trying to do that in the whole country, in any party. The Democrats and Republicans don't do it because they cap you off at $50 million for your primary spending budget. You know, Ralph Nader raised $8 million. That's the highest we ever got. It isn't even an issue for us, but it's not enough for them. And and none of the other candidates are making a serious effort to do that. So that's the second thing. We want to help the Greens become organizers and not just activists. Most Greens are pissed off former Democrats. You know, they were against the Iraq War, and, Kerry and Pelosi and them were for it. They just got mad about that. Or, they find out the local government is run by the real estate industry. In the city, it's the Democrats, and they're on the other side of, affordable housing plans. Or they're afraid of the police when it comes to police brutality. Politically and in some cases physically in a lot of cities. They won't stand up. Jill Stein, for her, she was a physician and doing environmental health, and she's lobbying the legislature in Massachusetts and figuring they've been co-opted or corrupted by the corporate funding. So they did an initiative referendum and got a public campaign finance bill passed by referendum. The Democrats had overwhelming control of both houses of the Massachusetts legislature, and they decided, fine, we're not going to fund it. That was the last straw for Jill Stein. So we have a lot of people, and their experiences are activism, but not the kind of things that a union organizer or a community organizer knows. How to maintain an organization, how to reach to communities that aren't involved with you yet. Greens, being activists, we go there and preach, but an organizer goes there and listens and finds out what's going on, how they can help, and builds a relationship and trust. So we want to impart those kinds of things to rebuild the grassroots base of the Green Party. So, our perspective is the way we're going to build this into a major party is by electing thousands of people. We got 150, which is more than any other third party, but there's over 500,000 elected officers in this country. And I'm hearing from people in Wisconsin, their county, boards of supervisors, where they got vacancies. Nobody wants to do it. I mean, Greens can step right up there and build a local base and then get to the state legislature and Congress. And when we have a caucus in Congress, it'll be hard to ignore us when we have a presidential ticket. So the other thing, with that kind of organizing, we need to target the people that aren't voting or are voting in low numbers. That if the Green Party is going to be a major party, that's going to be our base. And that's working class people, youth, and people of color. So what we hope to do once we get on the ballot and we get into the fall, is have regional workshops where people can come, maybe spend a day on the election kind of organizing you do for the campaign, another day on local organizing and how you build your local organization, expand its base, stay in touch. I go around and, so many cases where Greens, they collect names and then they don't communicate with the list. It's cheap now with the internet. And then there was one place where they went through the projects and got a whole lot of names, and then they didn't talk to them for a year. When they came back, it was an election, and people in the projects were like, you weren't serious about us. You haven't talked to us in a year. Go away. That's the kind of thing we gotta get better at. So that's the party building side of it, and that's what we're hoping to do with this campaign, and getting on the ballot and getting into the debates, at least through the media. Of course, getting into it on the same stage with Trump and whoever the Democrat is a long shot. But I'm ready for Trump. I'm just messing like, when's Mexico going to pay for our wall? You big liar. But anyway, so just two more things. I've mentioned keeping names. So this is a sign up to get on our email list, and we do ask for money, but we also tell you what we're doing and send content out. Somehow the Democrats think I'm a guy named Andy in Iowa. So they got a guy named Andy in Iowa. They keep sending me all their stuff, and all the candidates except Sanders. He doesn't seem to be in the circle, with all the presidential candidates and all the congressional candidates in Iowa, and all they do is ask for money. We ask for money, but we also tell you what we're doing, what statements have come out, what's going on. So that's what you get from that list. And then I mentioned matching funds, so I'm going to pass around the donation forms. We need 20 states to raise $5,000 in contributions of $250 or less. And then we qualify for matching funds. And all those monies will be doubled by the same. And that's really important to be able to pay petitioners. That's really our biggest expense. And we will accept cash, but we can't double that. Checks, you can put a credit card on here, that'll work, or you can go online and make a contribution there. If you want to go online today, I've got the computer set up. So I'm gonna pass these around. And so I'm gonna stop there and let's have a discussion. Go ahead.
So we have a list and we try to reach out, but I thought it was interesting what you said about organizers versus activists and preaching versus listening. Can you, we really need help on that. We have the list, we call people, we call it outreach, we're trying to bring them in. But what would be an example dialogue, that would be more listening and,
Well, if you got phone numbers on your list, call people up and, ask them, have they been getting the list or the emails you send them, they're reading them, what do they think? And, what's going on with them. I like to go on the doors, knock on doors and just talk to people. So many times I run into people like, nobody ever talks to me. And then they'll give you like 20 minutes about the issues. Mm-hmm. And there are people that won't even register to vote. There's a Teamsters buddy of mine, and for 20 years, I still haven't got to register to vote. He's a black guy. His son got killed in a stupid murder over a fight. He doesn't trust the system at all. And we talk politics all the time. If something's in the news, when I would get to work, he'd come run up to me. You hear what happened? What do I think? You want to talk about it. He's following it. And I say these people are alienated, not apathetic. So it's just a matter of building relationships and getting out there. And also, if they're in communities that are not involved in the group that you want to be in, find out what fights they are having and how you can help with those.
How about there seems to be this disconnect between the local, the state, and each time you go from local to state, there's a gap, and then from state to national, there's like a disconnect
within
the Green Party. It's particularly between local and national, because our meetings are just once a month and we can't cover. So how do we pull that all together?
Yeah, I have since about 2000 until this campaign focused on Syracuse, New York, and the state of New York. That to me was, it's big. New York's as big as the European country, and You know, it's like the 11th largest economy in the world. But I thought nationally, the way we're structured, there's not much accountability between our national reps and the local base. The way we allocate delegates is by this very complicated formula based. It's kind of like trying to get indices of what the activity is in a state. And it doesn't work. You know, like Texas, you know, they got a lot of votes, but it wasn't enough to get a ballot line. And so the whole party said we give up, and they like dropped dead until the Republicans decided they wanted the Greens on the ballot to counterweight the Libertarians.
Huh.
So the Republicans handed them their party back, and they came back to life. But while they were dead, they got 50% more delegates to the National Committee. I would rather see us have a mass membership party where you agree to the basic principles of the Green Party and you pay dues, and then we represent the membership proportionally from the states. And then I would recommend that states, we did this in New York, we went from a state committee that was basically self-appointed by petitions in assembly districts to you have to have a county organization that meets a certain level of organization, and then you can elect delegates. So the people who come to the state level, you know, there's some people that are difficult to work with, and they got their own issues, and they show up at these meetings and, you know, get us off into, you know, on tangents or their own agendas. And once we had this representational model, it went away. It stopped happening. So those are some of the things I think we need to do. And then people say, well, you want to put a proposal to the National Committee? My attitude is, let's do it in the states. And when, you know, the states are ready to do it nationally, well, no. I don't think you could have a big fight online on the National Committee, and it's one of those listservs where there's half a dozen people that got to have the last word, so they keep talking to each other forever. And everybody else kind of says, I can't keep up with this, and they tune out. And another problem is, I think we try to make decisions online, and people tune in and out. You get people in a room where they got to deal with what's on, they're all paying attention, they're hearing the arguments. I think it's just a better way of doing it. Although we might could do that with things like Zoom. Those are a few thoughts. That's a big problem. But to me, the key is organizing the base. We have strong locals and people who are smart. I mean, one of the things locals can do is develop us as activists and speakers and thinkers. Another thing I recommend is separate your business meetings from your educational, cultural action meetings. Because people come to the Green Party, they want to do stuff, they want to learn stuff. They don't want to figure out the budget and who the officers are and what the bylaws are. I mean, the basic decisions need to go to the membership, but they don't want to go through all the details. And if you bring new people to that kind of meeting, they don't come back. So anyway, those are some thoughts on that question.
How do you propose to convince companies to change over to new equipment and new infrastructure? As you mentioned, that is an issue. Most want to wait for their own budget because they don't want to just pay to have new things.
Well, I think we need to socialize those three key sectors: manufacturing, railroads, and energy production. And then some of this stuff is going to be, you know, we're not going to use it anymore as soon as we got a substitute for it. And then I think a key sector is agriculture. We need, like the original New Deal, a strong agriculture program to subsidize the transition to renewable energy. Organic agriculture. That's part of the bringing carbon out of the atmosphere back into the soil. We need parity pricing so that the cost of production, the crop prices go up with the cost of production, and not just with the big commodities like we subsidize now, provide some price supports, but with vegetables, fruits, dairy, everything. And then we need supply management, because those markets can be boom and bust, and when they're bust, farmers go out of business, and then agribusiness comes in. We need to bar corporate agriculture. We need farms to be operated by working farmers, not corporations that are trying to, you know, basically mine the soil and exploit what are now tenant farmers. So we need a whole program in agriculture. But I think you cover manufacturing, transportation, and then in housing, the developers don't want to build affordable housing. They will only do it if they're subsidized. It's more expensive to subsidize them with tax breaks or sometimes Section 8 vouchers. But the problem there is with outsourcing income, anti-discrimination laws, every other Section 8 gets pushed into the ghetto. And it's as bad or worse than public housing is now. So we need a much expanded public sector in housing. In Europe, some of those cities like Vienna, 60% of the people live in what they call social housing, either municipally owned housing or cooperative housing. And when it's that scale, then in the private market, the private landlord's got to compete with those public prices. So those prices come down too, and all the housing is affordable. So, and then there are industries like, this relates to the coronavirus. 15 of the 18 major pharmaceutical companies in this country no longer do research on vaccines, antibiotics, or antivirals. They are into the, heart stuff, the Viagra kind of stuff, the stuff that's chronic, you need to keep selling. They're the profit leaders. They don't even want to do the research on, you take a vaccine, it's a one-time thing. You can't make a lot of money from it. So we need to take that part of the pharmaceutical industry under public ownership and run it as a public utility. And we practically do it now because most of the research that is done is through the Center for Disease Controls and the National Institutes for Health and the grants they give the universities. So I think, we can go sector by sector, but I think, that's socialist solutions to these pressing problems are what we need in a lot of cases. Now, I would say that those people will say, well, what about the small business people that are self-employed? I would argue with these public avenues, private commerce will thrive. If you're somebody who wants to bring an idea to market for a restaurant or, some retail outlet or an idea that you think, might become something that would be useful and you could really go big, you can take those risks because you got health care. If you go bust, you can get a job. If you're low income that year, you're going to get your income topped up to above the poverty line. And I think more people will actually be, small entrepreneurs. And, we want to support, working farmers. So that sector of the economy, it'll be smaller in terms of overall output than the socialized sector, but there'll be more people actually, more businesses actually than these big businesses in the socialized sector. So I think that's the direction we got to go. Yeah.
I had a question but you were talking about moving towards a membership party in the Green Party, and I don't know that much about how the Green Party is structured, but in DSA, what we wanted to, a lot of us would like to build is a workers' party, kind of like the European Labor Party systems. Is that kind of similar to what you envision? If not, what are the differences?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That was what the left invented. In Europe, they didn't have a franchise. We kind of a different situation where, at least in abstract terms, the franchise was universal, but because it was, women, blacks, Indians, Asians, everybody that was excluded could appeal to that to get their vote. In Europe, 1848, the revolution said we want the franchise. And it was both the emerging professional business class as well as the workers. And what happened was the professionals and business class, they were fighting the landed elites that ran those countries. They gave the business and professional people the franchise. And then those people said to the workers, later for you.
Can you explain, what do you mean they gave them the franchise? What does that mean?
The vote.
Okay, so they were an exclusive group that had the power.
Yeah, the landed elites, they were autocratic, or sometimes they had legislative bodies and only property owners could participate in them, like in Britain. So you had the Chartist movement in the 1830s and 40s fighting for the vote. And the Chartists were the socialists of that time. And what they invented, because take England, you had the Whigs and the Tories, and they were, the business were the Whigs and the landed elite was the Tories, and they were sponsored to mobilize their votes by wealthy people. It was top down, and they didn't have a membership. They just, mobilized, the people that could vote to vote for them. So what the labor movement said was, well, we got to fund this ourselves, like we do our trade unions. So they formed a Labor Party. And, similar developments happened in other countries. And so that's what the left invented. And in this country, the populist movement kept blowing it because one thing our parties did were the first ones to have conventions, precinct, county, but it's like whoever came could vote. It didn't matter what their politics were. So that's how you get Lyndon LaRouche getting the Democratic nomination and David Duke getting the Republican nomination. And the Greens have had a few crazy people too. So you just show up and say you're in that party. You tell the state what party you're in. The party doesn't say if you can be in the party. There's no political agreement. And what happens is the base is atomized. So it's easily manipulated by people that got money in the organization. So the one exception, so the populist movement did that. And I think that's why in 1896, what was called the shadow populist movement was able to take over the real populist movement, which was organized into farmers' alliances and do fusion with William Jennings Bryan, the Democratic nominee, who really wasn't a populist, didn't buy the whole program. And that was the end of the populist movement. But the radicals, they called themselves middle of the roads because they were in the Democratic Republican, but they were the left. They were key in forming a socialist party of Debs and them. And they had a membership party that worked pretty well for about 3 or 4 decades and almost became a major party. There, a couple things happened. Well, a bunch of things happened along the way, but they were nipping at the bud. And up in this part of the world, you had in 1934, you had 2 governors, Wisconsin, Minnesota, 4 senators, and 13 members of Congress. And they were talking about a labor party or a farmer labor party. And unions were passing resolutions for a labor party. And they're trying to hook up with Huey Long, who, despite his racial problems, was an economic populist. And Roosevelt was scared. I think that's partly why we got the second New Deal, the progressive New Deal. Social Security, National Labor Relations Board, the Works Progress Administration, to co-opt that movement. And then Floyd Olson died of cancer, and Huey Long got assassinated. They never did come together, but there was a threat at that time. So since that time, we haven't had an independent left party that was a mass party. We've had groups like DSA, the socialists and the communists were small. Communists mostly work in the Democratic Party since the 30s, socialists since the realignment strategy in the 50s and 60s. And you could follow the Maoists in with Jackson and now the Trotskyists in with Bernie. I mean, the socialist left is in crisis. I mean, one of the ironies that all these professors the Greens are petty bourgeois. I'm contemplating that while I'm sweating my butt off at UPS. And it may be the Greens who have to tell the socialist movement, let's remember the principle of working class political independence. And also this model of, a left party. When the primary system came in this country, the progressives pushed it because they want to get rid of the old machines and the bosses. But the primaries, you have the money primary before you have the vote primary. The money primary is the candidates are like little businesses, and they go to the investors and say, invest in us. And the investors pick the winners, and then those are the ones that are prominent in the primaries. Meanwhile, the base is atomized. It's not organized. It's not talking to each other. It's getting messages from the money interests. And the socialists pointed that out at the time. They were saying our membership convention model is more democratic than this primary system. And I think they were right. So anyway.
So I'll see if I understand what you're saying. So the membership model is sort of a franchise in the sense that people buy into the platform and the values. And I mean, how do you how does the membership get the unity instead of being atomized? And how do you prevent somebody like LaRouche from coming in? And, what's your vision, and how does the other thing is this mass membership thing that spreads it across the states so the state boundaries aren't as important, and then we get better representation? That goes back a few minutes ago. I was trying to.
Well, you would have locals, in your state, you can decide how to divide it up. Counties made sense in New York because they're the principal unit that administers state programs and supersedes municipalities, except cities. It gets a little complicated, but they're a unit that's across the state. And it focuses on local politics rather than if you do like assembly districts or Senate districts, they change every census. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows what county, well, not everybody, but county boundaries they stay the same, so you can let people know. And then you federate up from that level.
And how do you prevent being infiltrated by other
Well,
groups?
you have principles. LaRouche obviously doesn't agree. Like, I set up a meeting with Murray Bookchin and Rudy Barlow, who's this exiled East German who joined the West German Greens. We had this meeting in New Hampshire, and two LaRouches show up who are black, and they're screaming at speakers, "You guys are racist because you won't let black people have nuclear power." They were there to disrupt. We had to physically remove them. We went on, but the thing is, the LaRouches, we're anti-nuclear, they're pro-nuclear. So obviously, sorry, you're not really with our party. You got some criteria. And I don't think we should be real sectarian about that. They should be broad principles, like our 4 pillars. And, some other principles like political independence. But, it shouldn't be a long laundry list. It should just be the big things that separate us from the 2 capitalist parties on the left. And then how do we get unity? We have a discussion and we take a vote, and I think it should be open, not once the vote's taken, everybody's got to do what the vote said. The discussion can continue. It's just the majority position is the position of the organization. The democratic centralism in practice tends to lead to splits, because if you really don't like what the group decided, you go off and form another group. And we need more unity than we do splintering.
So you would say that decisions are made at a local level and voted on. What if the results of those votes are different from other states and or different from national opinions?
Well, we would send delegates from the states, from the locals to the states to the national. National would adopt their platform. Like right now we got a debate, are we going toward an equal socialist position? The national platform's got a sentence in there, but not everybody agrees with it. That debate continues. That's fine as far as I'm concerned. It's more important to have the debate and get us all educated than have everybody towing a line blindly. So your delegates from the local would decide the national, and the locals should be able to have some variance with what the national would decide on particular issues. I don't have a big problem with that, because without those differences, you don't have discussion and advancement and everybody developing.
So when it comes down to it, who supersedes the other? If there's a stance of the Green Party, would it be national? Or because you live in a certain area, would it be different?
Well, the national speaks for itself and the local speaks for itself. And if they're a little bit different, that's what they are.
But how does that lead to party unity and being able to act as one in things like trying to elect nominees, especially on a national level? I mean, if there are differences in basic beliefs.
Well, hopefully we got unity around, half a dozen basic principles. Sure. And whoever is a nominee of any party, not everybody is going to be as enthusiastic as some other folks. That's just the way politics is. If you require everybody to toe what's decided in the national platform on issues that their differences, what you won't get the people that don't agree to get out there like the people who do agree. Maybe you silence them within the party, but then what are they going to do? They may decide this party isn't for me. And so you get the splintering. So I think we need to learn how to agree to disagree and tolerate differences and continue discussions. And I would say that's true across the whole left. The problems I'm describing, it's not just the left, it's the whole social movement culture. I think the new left had good criticism of the old left. They were slow on anti-racism, decolonization, feminism, the environment, the peace issues, which some of them transcended, economic class issues. But on the other hand, the old left had some good organizational principles. But we came out of the 60s after civil rights and the Vietnam War. We thought we just do big demonstrations and pressure the government and we get some results. And I think in practice, government can withstand that. We were the world's second superpower leading up to the Iraq War. And because there wasn't an independent alternative, Democrats, they could ignore us. They figured they had us in their hip pocket because we weren't going to vote with the Republicans. Yes.
What are the strengths of the Green Party nationally? What are the strongest?
I think there's some parties that are better organized than others. I think my party in New York's pretty well organized. California, not as well as it was organized. I did a tour there. They got a lot going on. Wisconsin and the scheming is like, I think you only got 4 delegates to the convention. But there's more going on here than a lot of states that got more than that. And then there are locals. I mean, that's where I really see it. Like East LA's got a real good core of people. These are Chicanos in an area where it's all Democrats. And, there are people like a union organizer with UE, or the congressional candidate, Rodolfo Cortez Barragan. And, basically about a dozen people, and they've got a real clear idea of what they're doing, and they're active on a whole range of issues. So it's uneven. And there's some states where, like I described Texas, they gave up. Texas is hard to get on the ballot. They needed like 80,000 signatures or something. And they said, we're not gonna do that until the Republicans hand them a ballot line. You never know. So it's uneven. I think that's probably the best answer.
Yeah, I just want to address a little bit what the lady said there. I talk in terms of wholeness, and I think a lot of people don't understand the importance of diversity in wholeness. It's not that we want everybody to think the same way. The Republican Party thinks like that, okay? So difference of opinion is not something that's going to lead to division as long as we believe in wholeness. Yeah, everybody has a right to their opinion and how they look at things, and we're not out to change people's minds. But I think one thing that I do think needs to happen is that we need to come to the realization that, we are the source of power. It's not the billionaires, it's not the oligarchs, it's not corporations. We give them their power, and we can take it back anytime we want. And whenever we want the world we want, it's going to be messy. Not everybody's going to agree on what the world should be, okay? But we just find a way to move forward, and if it doesn't work out as well as we want, we try something different. It's not that we're locked into some, magical set of principles that are going to solve every problem that we have. It's not going to work that way.
Yeah, I think one thing is we can build this mass party of locals where we have real discussions and, read things together and then have somebody get up and present what we read, to develop themselves as a speaker. And we can give them constructive criticism. There's not much of that going on. I mean, we're in this world where the nonprofit industrial complex, there's some billionaires behind them, they're right wings, they're liberals, and everybody sort of has their sources of information, and it's sort of wait for move on to tell them what the next thing is. And we never sit down together and strategize, or not so much on those kinds of questions. And so it's very top down. And what I was getting at before is when the old left went in the new left, we do periodic organizations, but we don't have the kind of grassroots civic organizations, not just, on the left, but, all the, the Masons, the bowling leagues, the American Legion posts, Boy Scout, where people used to meet and talk, now they're sitting at home on their computer or watching TV where you got, 3 cable networks giving you their lines. And I think that makes us dumber. When we have differences and we have a discussion, we all learn something. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. But, and here again, everything you read and see on TV and on the internet, it's all about how, we need to get these politicians elected to solve the problem. Hey, how's it going?
Sorry. Oh, we need a little.
It's okay. I was a little kid once too.
No, I hear what you're saying, and I'm in this party because of my ethic, okay? And that's the 4 pillars. And if there's variation within those columns, I've got issues. For example, a couple of decades ago, we had a black green in Chicago who was running, endorsed, and got money from McDonald's Corporation. And the local party didn't have the guts or the wherewithal to push off on that, And to me, that's wrong.
Right.
Because that's the main ethic in terms of the pillars. And so how far we vary is, there's discussion there, but I stop within those pillars.
Yeah, and that brings up, I think, one of the principles is part of political independence is we should be financially independent of the capitalist interests, so we don't take money from for-profit interests. There's a little controversy right now about should we take money from, I call them people's PACs, labor unions, peace organizations, community organizations. I got $500 from a socialist group, and a lot of people said, oh, it's PAC. And I said, well, yeah, but these are little people that put little money in and they gave it to a candidate they support. That's very different than a business interest, trying to, buy elections. So that's an issue where I don't want to throw the people out that criticize me taking that, people's PAC money. I'd rather, have the discussion and try to persuade them that it's really not the PAC money now, it's the dark money and the super PACs. And the super PACs get dark money through the 501c4, so we don't know where that money's coming from. And there's a lot of it thrown around the economy. The PACs is old news, and there are limits on PACs. There's no limits on this dark money. And what's the other money? Soft money. I forget my term, but the dark money is the money we can't trace because they don't have to report it. That could come from anywhere. It could come from the mafia.
Well, you're not taking money from McDonald's, right? If I may speak to the point that you brought up, I think personally, I don't have any issues with discussions within different topics, and everyone does need to have their opinion. Everyone's different. What I see and was trying to bring up is that within that discussion, which happens a lot at different levels, local, state, and then again national, so much splintered discussion, not at one place where everybody comes together, that it stymies like progression. Like nobody actually does anything because everybody has a different opinion and nobody's actually able to agree and move forward. And that's kind of what I was hoping that maybe you'd talk about in the organizational process. I know that you're saying that it's important to start at the local level, but it is still a little hard to see how the many local levels, if one is different from another, can push and progress to a state and or national level to get things done.
Well, it's just Wisconsin. You got locals, and then you have a state party, and the locals send delegates to the state party meeting, and then what are we going to fight for at the state level? We want to ban the frac sand mining, stop Enbridge Line 5. You know your issue better than I do. I know there are a lot of issues coming out of that, the Walker changes to labor laws. The labor movement relied on the Democrats. How'd that work out? So, that's something, the Greens might want to step up. Somebody told me, I guess it was there in Madison, they were talking with some in the labor council, and they said, where are the Greens? Well, you asked for it, we should show up and, give them our idea of what we need to do. So I think that's how you come together at the state level and pick your issues. And I was at a state party meeting recently. It was an all-day affair, and there was no discussion of politics. This was, well, I'll tell you, it was Michigan. It was the day after the weekend after Super Tuesday. But no discussion of, what the results meant for us. What it meant for us is that people are coming our way. We've already got, and particularly after Big Tuesday, in Michigan, that they had the vote, and their co-chairs were getting calls from people who were Sanders supporters saying, okay, we need to want to know how we get involved with you, because it didn't look good for Bernie. So they had, a lot of business. They actually got a lot done. They were really pleased with themselves because they usually they're fighting and, tabling everything. So they thought it was a great meeting, but I was struck. They asked me what I thought. I said, you need some political discussion. That's why people are in this party. That's what they really want to do. So I think, at the state level, the parties that are well organized do have some state campaigns. Like we just had a victory today in New York. The Democrats, this is really wrong. They set up a commission to write a law, which is unconstitutional in the New York State Constitution. And that's what they lost on. The decision came out today. And it was supposed to be for public campaign financing, but then Governor Cuomo wanted to kill third parties. That was the headline in the New York Times when they discovered what Cuomo was up to. The secret plan to kill third parties in New York. So they increased by 2.5 times the number of votes we need to get, double the number of times we have to get it. So instead of just every governor's race, governor, president. And if you don't get enough votes, and in our case, the only people who got the votes were Nader in 2000 and me in 2014. So it was going to be really tough for us this year with Trump on the ballot. If you don't get your ballot line, then you got to get 45,000 signatures in 6 weeks instead of 15,000. So I wrote an op-ed, saying the Democrats get all righteous about Russian interference, but with Democrats like these, who needs the Russians? And but the judge, fortunately followed the law and said, you have no authorization to delegate legislative authority. So now we're going to have a fight in the legislature. It might be appealed by the state, but I don't know. It was a pretty strong decision. Is Cuomo going to try to legislate this? And the irony is he'll have half the Democrats and all the Republicans. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. Well, I have heard from two people when I have talked about you that are saying that they won't support you because of your stance on Russiagate.
Yeah.
Now, I would like that explained. I don't understand it. And then the other question I have is, in 2016, when Green lost, I remember going to a Green gathering and people were just saying, well, we're going to have to get ready because we're going to have swarms of people coming in. And it was just like they were just sitting there waiting for, all these young people to come to the meetings and in fact, it sort of sounded like they were a little bit afraid there were going to be so many young people that they might take over. And it just.
They did that. They did.
And I'd like to know, what is the Israel plan to get these people now that are going to be disillusioned if Bernie loses?
Okay. Well, on Russiagate, whatever the Russians, I don't believe that justifies us escalating the Cold War with Russia. We're about to enter into war games. We just had 5 months of the biggest war games with Russia as the target during the Cold War. We're about to do it again with this coronavirus crisis. That's crazy. We got sanctions. We need some care. We got to work with the Russians on the arms race, the climate change. We got proxy wars in Ukraine and Syria. We're not engaged diplomatically in that. So I think that's the wrong approach. And whatever the Russians did, it's not why Clinton lost. Black voter suppression, Comey, reopening the investigation a week before the election. A whole lot of things happened, and they want to pick over the Greens and the Russians. And, that's an excuse for them. Now, I happen to believe that the Russians tried to influence the election. That's what people get mad about. But look, that's what capitalist states do. We've had, they spy. The Russians have been going back to Tsarist times. And we do it too. We do it more. We interfere. We've had academic studies. Since World War II, between World War II and 2000, an academic study found we interfered in 80-something elections and they interfered in 46-something elections. So, and when Trump says it's all a hoax, no collusion, why would we believe him when he lies about everything else? Now, getting into details, when I first got called, this is a distraction. Some of you were in the Trump narrative and some of you were in the Democratic narrative. Greens need to stay out of that. We need to focus on climate change, inequality, nuclear arms race, getting electoral reforms, instead of getting caught up in, all this stuff that a lot of it is based on, none of it's direct evidence. It's not like spies come and say, here's my business card. I'm with the GRE, the CIA. Stuff goes on. And I think stuff happened. I saw it. Trump said, show me, Russia, if you're listening, get Hillary's emails. And then they had a meeting in Trump Tower looking for dirt. And then Gates and Manafort give polling data on Wisconsin, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and Ohio to eliminate. Who was trained in the GRU. Nobody disputes that. Whether he's in it now or not, take your best hunch. To me, look, and there's a lot more that happened. But that's no excuse for Clinton losing, and it's no reason for us to have a stupid policy toward Russia. I mean, I don't like Putin. I don't like that autocratic system. I think it's repressive. On climate change, he's as bad as Trump. He says it's a hoax. Well, he doesn't say hoax. That's Trump's word. He says it's not man-made or anthropogenic. And they just launched a barge with 2 nuclear power plants on it. The first was 7 planned to go out into the Arctic Ocean to power oil and gas drilling. What could go wrong? We need to talk to them about that. And if we actually do a Green New Deal in the West, their economy is going to be in trouble because they're dependent on oil, well, gas in particular, but also oil exports. You know, we should go to them and say, look, you know, we got to deal with climate change. We're going to change. We want to help you make the transition instead of sanctions and, you know, war games and proxy wars. That's insane. So that's Russiagate. And your other question was,
About Sanders supporters.
oh,
Welcome.
yeah, Sanders. Yeah, well, you know, I would welcome them taking over because we're small. You know, it's not takeover, it's joining us. And, you know, we need to be more open to new folks. I think we get some of the locals get very cliquish, and some of the state parties, it's like they're little church that people want to protect. And, you know, when people run into that resistance, I say I'll organize them. You know, get a majority and I'll vote them. Because, you know, they have no right to do that. It's not a personal franchise. Now, in terms of Sanders, yeah, my campaign, there should be a webpage going up soon in welcoming them. I have tried to not scold or shame people. There are people in my local, one of my former campaign managers working on the Sanders campaign in New York. I haven't said a word about it. You know, she kind of quietly told us I'm resigning from the state committee because I'm over for Bernie. I think she was expecting us to jump all over, but, you know, we kind of understood that. And we'll welcome her back when, you know, Bernie meets the other as well. So we're setting that up, and I'm thinking about an article maybe for Jacobin, if they won't take it counterpunch, basically saying, you know, if you still want to fight for a Green New Deal and Medicare for all, our campaign is where to do that. And I've had points running around in my head. I think I'll get to work on that when I get home, like hopefully on Sunday.
So a couple things. Yeah, I like what you said about the Russiagate, that we shouldn't be fighting over that. I feel better. I'm a little bit along the line of the William Binney, that there is forensic evidence that suggests it was not a hack, that it was a leak, but I don't want to get into that. I'm more interested in how we pay for the Green New Deal and some details. We're going to have a speaker, or maybe we're not because of the coronavirus, Howard Schweitzer. If you could address.
We're not.
Yeah.
I talked to Howard.
Okay. If you could address that, though, a little bit, and
sure.
how you agree or differ with him and the MMT people. And then the other issue with the Michael Alpert dialogue, that was really interesting and valuable. If you have any follow-up on that open letter that went back and forth.
Okay. Well, the pay for the Green New Deal, more progressive taxation, new priorities, including deep cut military spending cuts. And if you do the economic bill of rights, we're going to save some on the social spending, like instead of unemployment insurance, we'll be paying people to do jobs. So you take it out of that column, you spend it on the other. And then, so new priorities, progressive taxation, and then we're going to we got to spend this money now, and we can't wait to bring in the revenues. So then there's 2 ways to do that. The MMT people say, as long as the dollar is a reserve currency, we can pretty much borrow as much as we want.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to borrow more once we get the full capacity, because that might cause inflation. But we can borrow it. And Ellen Brown has called that green quantitative easing. This time we bail out the people in the planet instead of the banks. And I'm willing to do that because we got to do it now. And the problem with that is that's not free money. You know, the Treasury sells bonds. We got to pay back the bonds plus interest. That's basically transferring wealth to the financial oligarchy.
Right.
The Greens have a proposal. It's very radical. It's the Green Party of the U.S. and the Green Party of England and Wales. And we call it greening the dollar. It's public money. I like to call it the new greenback proposal because it's a modernized version of what the populist movement was talking about. And that would be you get rid of the Fed and prevent banks from creating money by extending loans more than they've got in reserve. And you have a monetary authority in the Treasury Department that increases the money supply to what commerce needs by spending it through the federal budget. And those are greenbacks, which can be in digital form as well as, paper money.
No debt.
And right, we're not borrowing it. But when we do green quantitative easing, the Treasury sells the bonds. And some people think the Fed can buy those. They can't. Not when they're first issued. Once they're on the market, the Fed can create credits on its balance sheets and buy those off the market and put it in its assets. So it's a more roundabout way. But people think because the Fed can create that money, it's free money. No, they buy the bonds, but eventually Treasury's got to pay for those bonds, pay them back with interest. And that's why I think the greenback proposal or greening the dollar is superior. But it's such a radical change and so few people understand it that if we get power, and I don't think it's going to happen this election, but say in 2024 and we start to move on a radical Green New Deal, I think we're going to have to borrow money like the MMT people say, just as a practical matter, even while we advocate and educate for this greening the dollar reform.
Yeah, I like it. Afterwards, I'd like you to go through that very slowly, the greenback thing, but not now. I mean,
Yeah,
it seems like you understand
If
it.
you go to the Equal Social Green New Deal and look
Okay.
at how we pay for it, that's the budget part at the end.
Okay.
There is a, 5 or 6 paragraph explanation of those differences, which
Great.
a lot of people said is the clearest they've had explained to them. And man, it took me a while to get that all straight because it's, not a lot of people understand. But just a brief comment on Benny, Drake and Ritter and other people in veterans intelligence professionals.
Right.
Sanity said,
McGovern.
Benny's wrong. And then the nation had a debate, brought in some Harvard computer experts, and they basically said you both are drawing more inferences than you can from the data you have. And I say, this is above our pay grade, man. This is computer stuff I don't even understand. So I'm like agnostic on that question.
Yeah. I'd like to know where the chain of custody, they never tell you where they got the original data from. And I've looked at the forensic.
That would be,
It's like, come on.
that would be WikiLeaks, who keeps their sources anonymous, as they should. They should not, they should be prosecuted for the 2010 leaks.
Well,
They're not even on trial.
yeah,
for
but
that.
even the WikiLeaks source, point me to that.
I can't. And Julian Assange won't
No,
say.
no, I mean the data drop so that I could go to the file and then look. But never mind.
Okay, yeah.
You're losing me, Tom.
Yeah.
There's a starting file that they all looked at, and it was on Wiki. There was a bunch of server logs, and they all focused on that. I want to know where that is. Maybe I don't know the source of that, but I just want to know where that
I'm not
is.
sure it's still on anymore.
I think it
Okay.
probably.
Well, I think we're in the
way.
We're in the weeds.
Yeah.
Bring us back,
So, just for some context, we're supposed to have Howard Schweitzer up next week to talk about greening the dollar, but the event in Madison is canceled because of coronavirus, so he's not going to come up anymore. He may still join us by video call, so we're still kind of thinking about it. That's over at Linneman's, 6:30 next week on Thursday. But my question is, the Green Party talks about a lot of the most horrifying topics all of the time because of the issues that aren't being talked about, and they're very important to us. Here in Milwaukee, we're dealing with the lead crisis in our water. We're dealing with a prison downtown that is basically just like a torture camp. So 18 people have died in the last 17 years that it's been here. And
It's 18 years now.
18 people in 18 years. And most everybody who's there is just a low-level offender. And it's a maximum security prison. So it doesn't make any sense.
It's for revocation holds.
Mhm.
It's for
Revocation,
Yeah.
Parole,
revocation, parole, revocation hold.
So-
violated in New York. They violate you.
Yeah, so we can give you some information about that. But anyway, we talk about all of these really horrifying topics. And on top of that, the media always talks about us as spoilers. We have some very negative language around Greens. And so we're kind of seen as not fun, totally like devoid of any humor or any spirit. Why should anybody come around us? All we have is meetings. So my question to you is, what do you like to do for fun, and what kinds of events would you like to put on to really boost the spirits of everybody coming?
Well, I like to tell jokes during debates. I actually got a write-up one time, like they said, you know, the attack. Howie, you've lost all these elections. Why are you even bothering to run? Well, the Democrat and Republican had lost their last election. So I said, you know, all three of us lost our last election. You're going to have to choose between three losers. You know, and the whole audience broke up. And even the guy that asked the question hostilely had to laugh. So I think that's one place, you know, if we can show that, you know, in context, you know, humor goes a long ways. You know, I'm really an introvert. I mean, my idea of a good night is reading a good book at home. And I go to the gym, that's about it. But my local, you know, they have Halloween parties every year. They do a lot, they're younger folks, you know, the younger folks got, you know, things they do, and it brings in a lot of, you know, enjoy that kind of activity. So, you know, the cultural things. And then, you know, it depends on the community. I mean, you know, black people tend to go to church. We got a lot of Mohawks, you know, iron workers, and they have their own kind of stuff. But, you know, people go to these different events, so they, you know, get involved with some other folks that, you know, they wouldn't in the normal course of things. So that's not my forte. I recognize its importance. And I think also what I mentioned earlier, you know, if we have good discussions or good speakers that people want to hear what those people have to say, and they know the Greens put it on, then, you know, that gives them a positive attitude about it. Because if they like the Greens, got something to say. I mean, and, you know, at least in Syracuse, I mean, it's got to the point where the Democrats come to us for ideas. You know, DSA, you know, the Equal Social Screening deal. In New York, they keep asking me questions. You know, like public power. They want to go, you know, misplace all power in the state, and I've been working on that since the 70s. So, for example, there was a proposal for model state legislation printed in the Congressional Record in 1974. You can't even find it online. So I gave that to them. And, but they don't give me credit. But, you know, we'll work that out. So, all I can say is you're raising an important issue, and I'm not probably the best person. I'm, like I said, more of an introvert. You put me in front of people I can talk with, you know. If I wasn't doing this, I'd probably be reading something.
Yeah, I want to ask this question. I don't want to ask this question. So, yeah, you know, I want you to win. And at the same time, that may not happen. Okay. And there's a lot of conversation, a number of articles in terms of the downward curve of the Democratic Party in terms of the impeachment in the Senate. If they lose this election, it's going to be an opportunity for third parties. And I've seen this come up in a number of places, a new opportunity for third parties. If you don't win, how would you see that?
If I don't win the presidency.
Yes.
Well, I think during the campaign, you know, one message to our people is the more votes we get, the more leverage and gravity we're going to have in what comes next. And what I'm saying, and most reason I'm running this is I wrote an article, I originally titled it From the Bottom Up. It was about building a left party, and International Social Review printed it, and the Black Agenda Report did. And I think that's why the people that kind of pulled this draft Howard thing together, you know, that's what they read. And what I was saying is, and what I've been saying to Greens is we should be electing thousands of local people going forward. And we need to do a better job of tooting our horn to the broader social movements and to the socialist left. I mean, socialist left is in crisis. They collapsed into the Democratic Party. You know, the principle of working class political independence is like, people have forgot it. You know, Michael Albert wrote that open letter. I didn't answer that question. And I argued with Michael on this in 2004 when the safe states thing was going around. And he said, oh, that's just a tactical question. And I tried to explain it's been a principle of the socialist movement, you know, back to the 19th century. But he's a new lefty. He never really had much contact with the old left. He read Marx on economics, but not on politics. So I think, you know, there's a vacuum there that the Greens need to fill. So you know, the way I explain it to people is the Democrats and Republicans aren't solving problems, and we got real solutions. And since they won't, and the way we advance those solutions is by speaking for ourselves instead of doing what I call political ventriloquism. You know, a lot of progressives try to get that, you know, mainstream Democrat to do and say what we want. And it's like trying to do ventriloquism, but it doesn't work too well. And we're stronger and more effective in speaking and acting for ourselves to the public. Another thing we need to do is stop trying to organize the left and organize the people. You know, the people out there that, you know, you talk to them, it's like, where have you been? You know, they got a whole lot of things on their mind. And they want to do things, they just don't know how. I did a civil disobedience action on single payer like 10 years ago, and I got, you know, the police in the city, normally they have these sort of orchestrated civil disobedience things, and they're in and out, and this was kind of rogue. You know, it was different than the usual suspects in the peace community that they do that with. And so they told me, you know, if you don't, I was delivering a letter to WellPoint, which had just been barred from servicing Medicare because they're withholding services. And I was, I can't remember what the letter said, but it was appealing to the workers there. And they wouldn't let me in to give them the letter. So I stood in the doorway and they said, well, we're not going to rain you today. We're going to, you know, keep you in. They ended up keeping me in 48 hours in the holding cell. And I rode around like Freddie Gray in one of them, you know, sort of triangular, and they were driving, speeding around over all the potholes we got in our city all day before I got in the tank. But I remember in the tank, I actually knew the mothers and aunts of some of those kids. And they were talking about their crazy trips on drugs. I mean, they were off into that scene. And, but then one of them turned to me and was like, you're that political guy. How did you get into politics? And I said, well, you know, back in the 60s. And I told them about the stuff, and they're like, yeah, well, that might as well have been the Civil War to them. It didn't work. But, you know, they did ask the question. And I think there's just a lot of people out there that we can reach if we, you know, build a relationship with them.
Any comments on Venezuela, Honduras, Bolivia, and yeah, what about the social movements there and you know, socialism there?
Well, first of all, the U.S. shouldn't be telling them who their government should be. That's their business. And you know, it's pretty astounding that Trump could say, you know, we're promoting democracy in Venezuela. The new president's up in the balcony. You know, that's like anybody that stops to think for a minute can see what's wrong with that. So I think that's the first thing we need to do. Now, if you talk to the left in those countries, you know, they got criticisms of, well, all three of those governments. And I think each situation is a little different. This recent coup in Bolivia, I don't know if we got direct evidence, U.S. is behind it, but knowing how those militaries are set up, where they get trained, where they get their arms from,
Right.
and how quickly the U.S., you know, supported this right winger. I mean, she's a piece of work. She's really right wing, you know, fundamentalist Christian that is anti-indigenous, very racist. So, you know, I think the main thing we got to do is say that's not right. The U.S. shouldn't be doing that. It's not about our defense. These people should be able to determine their own futures.
Is the president in a position to actually stop that?
They have the formal authority. Whether they have the practical authority to tell, you know, the Pentagon and the CIA what they should be doing is a political question. You know, how much of a mandate does the candidate come in? Do they have their own military? I mean, that's a whole nother question, you know. How do we dislodge the, particularly, Seymour Hersh had a piece a while back called Rocks and Crusaders, or he called them the Rocks and Crusaders. The Crusaders are these fundamentalist Christians that were going to war in the Middle East like it was the Crusades. And they were gonna, you know, kick the butt of the Muslims and, you know, advance Christianity. And it's people like Crystal and people like that. And then there were the Rocks. Tended to be more of the black officer, general officers like Colin Powell. They're not particularly progressive, but they're not on a crusade, and they don't want to get in wars unless, you know, it's really necessary. And so a friend of mine who teaches African American studies at Syracuse University, Horace Campbell, actually has gone around and interviewed some of these generals and is doing some work on that. And, you know, we really got to pay attention to what's going on in the armed services. Now, I'm Vietnam era. I got my draft number came up. I enlisted in the Marine Corps as part of the GI movement, and there was resistance to the Vietnam War, even within the Marine Corps. And any fundamental change, I think, our movement needs to be nonviolent. But in the end, the armed forces have got to decide they're not going to wipe us out and slaughter us. And that means we've got to fraternize with people in the armed forces like we did during Vietnam. GI coffee houses played a big role, and Nixon had the Vietnamese to war for one reason was the Army stopped fighting by 69. And that we had big demos. The secret plan to end the war was to tactically move north of Vietnam. And after the moratorium and the big demos 30 days later, November 15th, 1969, Nixon and Kissinger said, Nixon can't get reelected. There might even be a revolution if we went ahead and did that. And then, of course, the resistance to the Vietnamese. But I think, you know, in the long run, we've got to, and this is controversial with some people. I mean, Bobby Seale used to say, when he was talking about community control, he had friends in the open police that would tell him who the racists and the sadists were. So, you know, they could watch him. And I do the same thing. I got cops in the Syracuse police force that will tip me off when they're going to mess with us at demonstrations, or even shit going down in the neighborhoods. So I think, you know, rather than saying all cops are pigs, I mean, the poster for the community control in Berkeley said pigs are policemen. They want proper policing, not just no policing, or they're all pigs, as they used to say. And so I think we gotta think about those parts of the state that are armed as the rank and file. We gotta win over, at least neutralize. And so if you're the president, are they going to do what you say? I think that's a question. I'm not even sure they're doing what Trump said. You know, maybe thankfully.
But it's special forces and CIA. Those aren't troops. It's a whole another clique, right? That overthrows and does the coups. And
well, they're the ones that, you know, execute those orders, but they draw them out of, you know, you go to
military,
boot camp and then you apply for these schools, or they ask you to apply for those schools, and you know, that's how they get those guys.
But I would just want to reaffirm that exists in terms of the military. You know, when I headed the biggest peace coalition in the country, I had 4 black generals tell me to kick Bush's ass because he was using it. There's an intelligence, you know, among other factors. And I just bring up the fact that, you know, during the last 50 years, there have been 50 wars of destruction and death and violence, but there also have been 50 turnovers of governments without any violence. And I bring up Tunisia during the Arab Spring. I've been to Tunisia twice. I love Tunisia. During the Arab Spring, they were the first. They were the only one who had a completely nonviolent revolution. The other ones had violence and they didn't succeed. And they won because when they hit the streets, and we can't do it, we don't have the influence, my friends in Europe. Oh, get 1 million people out here and change the government. That's not quite the same here. But in other places, they get 2 million people in the streets of Tunis. They win over the army the dictator runs away. You know, but they won over the army. And so that's happened many times in this world.
Yeah, Erica Chenoweth has
Yeah.
a lot of document,
Yeah.
comparing armed struggles versus nonviolent struggles.
Yeah.
And the key factor is, it's not like the armed forces aren't there, it's that they go over to the side of the revolution, or they split and decide they're not gonna fight.
Yeah.
They get neutralized. I mean, the Iranian Revolution, it was mass strikes, and then the women marched, and the soldiers would fire the women, and the problem there was, they had these Islamic Marxist groups that aligned with Khomeini. And once Khomeini's people got power, those groups, they were executed. So choose your allies carefully. Okay, well.
Thank you very much.
People coming. I can hang around if you want to talk. Oh, let me say one in.
Oh, yeah.
The Wisconsin Greens have a convention on April 18th where you're gonna pick your presidential preferences. And I ask for your vote, and I hope you show up.
You got it.
But mostly show up, man. Green turnout's been low.
Yep.
And, I think it might change now that, it doesn't look good for Sanders, but
I think we just need a better message. It's not about parties, it's about winning people's minds. It's not about winning elections, it's about winning people's minds. And we just have to give them the idea, just like in Tunisia, where the people said, we've had enough of this stuff, and it's not a violent revolution. And enough people go around and say, yeah, let's do this. We can do better than these guys. What kind of world do we want to live in?
yeah, but I would argue, if you look at the polling, the people are with what the Greens are advocating. We have a majoritarian position on a lot of issues. That's why Bernie's doing good.
Right.
Medicare for all, Green New Deal, a lot of those things. The people are way ahead of the politicians. It's this system of, the two-party system, lesser evil. That's how they keep the change from happening.
They've got a choice, though. That's what we are, and that's why you're running.
Yeah.
We do have a choice, and so they can make that choice, and they're free. And once it gets to be enough people, things will change. But most people are afraid of change, even though they know change is going to happen no matter what.
Well, I think the thing we got to persuade them on is that, you better vote for what you want and get it, and vote for what you don't want. I'm sorry. Vote for what you want and not get it, and vote for what you don't want and get it. That's a quote from Eugene Debs.
Yes, it is. So, couple things. I think everybody here knows that our next Greater Milwaukee Green Party meeting is Saturday at 10:30 at the East Library. Please come.
I thought it was MLK. No? Is it Easter MLK?
Oh, God.
Well,
You can find the
We'll
answer
check.
to that
Yes.
online.
Yeah.
Yes.
it's on
Yeah.
Facebook.
Just try Google it.
It's on
Solves a lot of
Facebook.
problems in my life.
Yeah.
Facebook is the authority, right?
And we already mentioned April 18th. People need transportation. We can probably arrange that. The other important date that I want to mention, and it is July 1st, which is when petitioning starts to get the Green Party nominee for president on the ballot. One of the things that we're going to do on Saturday is get people ready for petitioning. I'm going to talk about some of the things that you do when you're petitioning for green, because there's lots of folks who are either out of practice and or have never done it before. So we'll talk about that for 20 minutes. We will also be setting our annual goals. Yes, it's a little late.
I have a couple announcements too. So I already announced next Thursday's events. It's still tentative, so watch for emails and texts. There's the April 7th election. Don't miss out on that. But there's also the April 13th Conservation Congress hearing. That's going to be at Cudahy High School at 6:30 p.m. there's a lot of things to vote on. There's candidates. It's a good one for us to show up at, and we can actually vote on the Green New Deal there because I plan to present it. So, yeah, make sure not to miss that, and I'll also send reminders. Thanks.
And before we go, first, in addition, as you leave, if you live in the city of Milwaukee, the Greens have endorsed the referendum for MPS, and there are yard signs.
Oh, she.
So, right on your way out.
Oh, okay, great.
And lastly, thank you, Samir, for allowing us to have this room tonight. I know you all should contribute to Howie first, but this is an important resource for the genuinely progressive movements in the city and the broader region. It costs a lot to keep the lights on, and we keep going, and we've been asked, since we were not asked, Samir doesn't charge us for the room, but he appreciates, but we'll appreciate
Yeah.
a little bit of, yeah.
Howard doesn't want money right now.
Thanks
Well, thanks for
everyone
coming,
for
Tom.
coming out.
Yeah.
How you be here for a little while? Where are you tomorrow?
My schedule.
Oh, yeah, right.
Thank you.
I shake your hand, you're not supposed to, hey, we can do this.
Yeah. We're getting used to
Good, good.
There may be an event tomorrow unless it gets canceled, so you can leave the chair.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. This is open.
Get elected to be co-chair of TSA in the election.
It's,
We're doing online voting.
Yeah, we do online voting. The annual meeting might be rescheduled because of coronavirus.
Oh, shit.
Because it's our biggest meeting.
Right.
But, it's still, it's not gonna be postponed more than a couple of weeks.
Okay.
We're not going like.
Well, we're gonna do the voting online.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, we just do,
Annually, nationally.
annual.
For Milwaukee TSA.
Yeah, but, yeah, I'm, currently education officer, but for, co-chair. this.
How many candidates are there for the two co-chair positions?
So, I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know all the candidates.
Yeah, the advantage of this
That's
is,
kind of-
well, I should end it. At least with YouTube,